Hello and welcome to another update. In this one, I'll be covering the latest developments throughout the front line. Starting out in the northeastern outskirts of the Kharkiv front, we see here that fighting continues over the village of Sinkivka. The Russian focus has switched from directly attacking the village to going around by the road and further south to cut off Sinkivka through the road, through the supply line, and then go around it, pushing the Ukrainian forces back rather than capturing the village. The village right now is a kill zone where both sides, if either of them go inside the village, they will just end up getting hit by multiple launches of artillery and so on, whichever weapons they have available on that location on both sides. So neither side is now willing to go into Sinkivka. So the fighting is now operational fighting between the two sides, as there will be fighting ongoing in the forest line here to the west of Sinkivka and over the road to the east of Sinkivka. Whoever wins these positional battles will get Sinkivka by default, as the other will be forced to retreat to the next position. And we can see over the past few days, the Russian forces have managed to advance these three areas, which indicates that this is indeed the strategy that they're going with. They're fighting through the eastern flank, trying to push through, capture the Ukrainian defensive positions here, as there are multiple fortifications built by Ukraine throughout these fields, and the Russian forces have been going through them one by one, capturing them and taking them over as they push the Ukrainian forces back from these positions and now have fight control over the road between Sinkivka and Petropavlivka. This is what the fortifications in this area looks like. And then slightly southeast of this position, fighting continues over Kotlярivka and Kislivka. There's been no direct update as to since the Russian forces managed to get a foothold within Kotlярivka here on the southeastern outskirts. Based on the latest reports, fighting should be ongoing in the area. However, there is no clear indication as to what the current situation is around these two villages. We then move on to the Klishchivka area to the south of Bakhmut. We see here that fighting continues over the village as both sides continue their attempts at making some sort of capture of the area. Heavy fighting continues. The last we saw was the Russian video where they were storming the village. Since then we have received no real videos from this area. However, what we do see is this video here, which is a comparison between two satellite images that showcases the heavy destruction within the village of Klishchivka in comparison to the 22nd of June compared to the 6th of August. So we see heavy destruction throughout the whole area, especially within the village and to the fortifications to the north and south of the village, but just everywhere completely destroyed. Moving on to the Zaporizhzhia and Urushaina area, we see here fighting continues intensively as the Ukrainian forces continue their attempts at fully capturing the village of Urushaina. Throughout the past few weeks to a month, the fighting has been ongoing by Zaporizhzhia and Urushaina, where the Russian forces have held and tried to hold on to the villages, the twin village across the river line separating the two. They were fighting here for many weeks, and now they are pushed out of the areas. The Ukrainians are very close to capturing Urushaina, which would leave them with control over both villages. Now we see the Russian forces possibly attempting a counterattack. There's been some reports on that, although I'm not really sure about the authenticity. But there are some reports of heavy fighting here. But most likely it's just artillery shelling, as the Russian forces continuously launch artillery strikes in the direction of Urushaina and Zaporizhzhia to try and whittle down the Ukrainian numbers before they launch their next attack towards Zaporizhzhia. So what we're seeing right now is that right now, in the eastern side of the river line, there is no village under Russian control except for the half of Seremenivka by the river line. Other than that, there are the villages of Novodonetsk, Kremenchik, and Novomezhmayorsk, and so on, which are here to the east, separate from this river line. So this means that the Ukrainians are now able to launch attacks towards these villages now that they are isolated from the river line, from the Russian positions in that area. Currently what we're seeing is that the Ukrainian forces are building up their reinforcements here in the back, and preparing for a push towards some of these villages, as well as further south and also in the direction of Priotne, as they try to take advantage of the capture of Vodoshine by focusing on these other areas, spreading out their forces and hitting them all at the same time, which would then allow them to spread out the Russian forces, which are spread thinly across the head of the front line. So this means that the Ukrainian forces may be looking to launch some attacks in these areas towards the other villages other than Vodoshine and Zaporizhzhia, as they'll try to gain control over the eastern parts of the river line, which would then allow them to make a proper assault towards Seremenivka, especially if they can do it from both sides. Then they would be able to capture the village of Seremenivka, which is the main stronghold of the Russian forces ahead of the first line of defense. We then move on to the area of Robotyne, south of Orikhiv. We see here in this area that the Ukrainian forces continue their attacks non-stop in this direction. From the latest waves, we have these two pictures, still frame pictures from a video that I don't have the full video of. I just have these still frame images, but one shows a Lancet drone striking a Leopard tank north of Robotyne, and the second one shows a Marder infantry fighting vehicle which was geolocated just east of Robotyne. These are both geolocated by Rybar as seen in this image here. This is the general situation across this front line. Not only do we see Lancet and artillery strikes on the Ukrainian positions, we also have the minefield, and as seen by this video here, which showcases a Ka-52 helicopter launching a guided missile, anti-tank guided missile against a Ukrainian tank through this part of the front line. So we're seeing the Russians consistently showing that they're capable of resupplying their forces despite the Ukrainian hits on their back line, and we also see that they are able to prevent the Ukrainians from making any significant advances, which showcases the capability of the Russian defenders throughout this offensive, that they have been able to hold the Ukrainians back for this many months. And at the same time, we see that the forecast for the next Ukrainian offensive, the next time Ukrainians will have a capable force similar to this, will be next summer, according to Western media, as they see based on the weapon supply to Ukraine. There's two types. There is the offensive type, and then there is the consistent supply of ammunition and so on that allows the Ukrainians to be on the defensive. So the offensive type they do in batches. So like the tanks, they send all the tanks in one batch to allow the Ukrainians to launch this offensive. We have seen them previously with the HIMARS and so on. They have these things that they send batch by batch. And then after they send the initial run, like what we've seen here, they've sent a lot of Leopards, the 12 Challenger tanks, the 31 Abrams tanks, all of this in one batch. And then there's the consistent supply, which is the Leopard 1s, which are of lower quality but higher quantity. So the higher quantity will not allow the Ukrainians to launch significant offensives, but it will allow them to be on the defensive to support their defenses and so on. So the Ukrainians are receiving these two types of supplies, and the next time they'll receive this quote-unquote batch, this is the F-16s, this is estimated to be by next summer. So until next summer, Ukraine will be able to advance with limited offensives, but a major offensive like this one, it will have to wait until next summer. So this is actually a terrible position for Ukraine to be in, because if they do not succeed with this one, they'll have to wait a whole nother year until their next attempt. And just building everything up for one big offensive and it's then failing is a huge morale hit, especially if you cannot make some other attempts. Like this is the one attempt Ukraine will get until next summer. So this whole next year, Ukraine will be on the defensive, unable to make any major offensives. And that is going to be all for this update. Make sure to check me out on Patreon or PayPal if you want to support me further. Thank you all for watching and have a great day.